Have you ever had that unsettling feeling that something was off, but you couldn't quite put your finger on it? Like maybe you made a decision, but deep down you weren't sure it was really your own? Maybe you agreed to help someone when every part of you wanted to say no. Maybe you stayed silent in an argument even though you knew you were right. Or maybe you trusted someone who later showed you a completely different face. If any of this sounds familiar, then let me tell you, you're not imagining it. You're not crazy. You are living in a world that manipulates you every single day. And I'm not talking about hypnotists swinging pocket watches or Hollywood villains pressing red buttons. No, the most dangerous kind of manipulation is the one that doesn't look like manipulation at all. It's the kind that makes you believe you're in charge, that you're making free choices, that your mistakes are yours alone. The truth is, most of the time, you're being guided like a piece on a chessboard, playing a game you didn't even realize you were in. And the worst part? When you finally start to notice, you're hit with guilt, fear, or self-doubt. You've been conditioned not to fight back. Think about how often this happens. You tell yourself you're just being nice, or respectful, or understanding. But what if that's not really the case? What if that niceness is actually the result of years of silent training, subtle pressure from family, culture, media, leaders, even the people you love most? What if you've been carrying invisible strings your whole life, strings that tug you toward decisions that don't serve you? And here's the uncomfortable truth: if you don't recognize those strings, you'll keep dancing to someone else's tune. Let's be honest for a second. We live in a culture that thrives on influence. Advertising doesn't just sell you a product, it sells you an identity. Politics doesn't just give you policies, it gives you enemies and heroes to believe in. Relationships don't just offer love, sometimes they come with obligations disguised as affection. And you, whether you realize it or not, are absorbing it all. The shows you watch, the posts you scroll, the people you spend time with, all of them are shaping your decisions more than you'd like to admit. Here's the brutal part: the best manipulators don't want you to notice. In fact, their greatest victory is when you're convinced you're immune. If you're sitting there thinking, "This doesn't apply to me," I guarantee it applies even more than you think. Because that's exactly how manipulation works. It hides in plain sight. It makes you believe you're free while quietly steering your behavior. Imagine for a moment that your life is a stage play. You think you're the main actor, calling the shots, writing your lines. But in reality, someone else has handed you a script. They've assigned the roles, built the set, and set the cues. You're performing faithfully, thinking it's all yours. That's what manipulation is: invisible theater. And most people never even realize they're acting out someone else's plot. But before we go further, let's pause here. Why does this matter so much? Why should you care about manipulation when life already has enough struggles? Because if you don't learn to see the strings, you will spend your life pulled in directions you never chose. You'll wake up one day and realize that your career wasn't built on your passion but on someone else's agenda. You'll see that your relationships weren't shaped by love but by fear and guilt. And you'll wonder why your soul feels so restless, why even after doing the right thing, you feel empty. This is the call I want you to hear. It's time to wake up. It's time to stop being a silent pawn on someone else's board and start playing like a strategist in your own life. And I'll be straight with you, this isn't about comfort. I'm not here to pat you on the back and tell you everything's fine. Because it's not fine. You're being manipulated daily, by ads, by news cycles, by toxic friends, by family dynamics that never got questioned, by bosses who understand your weaknesses better than you do. The only way to break free is to confront the reality head-on. Think about this: every time you feel that little pang of guilt for saying no, every time you go along with something just to keep the peace, every time you silence your intuition because you don't want to upset someone, you're handing over a piece of your freedom. Little by little, string by string, you let someone else take control. And if you've ever wondered why life feels heavy, why you feel stuck, why you feel like you're not really living on your own terms, this is why. Now, here's the good news. The very fact that you're hearing this, that you're starting to question, means you're already cutting the first string. Awareness is the first weapon against manipulation. Once you see the game, you can no longer unsee it. Once you recognize the theater, you can step off the stage. And that's where true freedom begins. But I need to warn you, this isn't a comfortable journey. Once you start seeing manipulation, you'll notice it everywhere. You'll see it in the way your coworker frames a request, in the way your partner argues, and the way social media sells you a lifestyle. At first, it can feel overwhelming. You might even wish you could go back to not noticing. But that's the cost of waking up. Once you know, you can never go back to sleep. So let me leave you with this thought as we move forward. Freedom isn't just about doing whatever you want. Freedom is knowing why you want it. It's understanding the forces pulling at your decisions and choosing consciously instead of blindly. Most people will never take that step. They'll keep playing their roles, thinking they're in charge, while someone else quietly writes the script. But you're here, you're listening, and you have the chance to step out of the puppet role and into the strategist's seat. This is the beginning. The strings are still there, but now you're starting to see them. And once you see them, you have a choice: keep dancing or start cutting. Now that we've ripped back the curtain and exposed the fact that manipulation is everywhere, the next question is simple: how does it actually work? What's inside the manipulator's toolkit? Because make no mistake, manipulation isn't random. It isn't clumsy. It's methodical, calculated, and built on a deep understanding of human nature. And if you want to defend yourself, you need to see the tools before they're used against you. Think about the last time someone convinced you to do something you didn't really want to do. Did they scream at you? Did they twist your arm? Probably not. Most manipulators don't use force. They don't need to. They use something far more powerful: persuasion. They know how to push just the right button so that you give in willingly, believing it was your choice all along. That's the first tool: persuasion disguised as your own idea. Here's how it works. A skilled manipulator studies you before they even open their mouth. They watch your body language, your tone, the way you respond to small cues. They notice if you crave approval, if you flinch at criticism, if you soften when someone compliments you. They map your emotions like a GPS, and once they know the terrain, they guide you exactly where they want you to go. This isn't magic, it's attention. And most people are too distracted to realize they're being read like an open book. One of the most common tools is charm. The smile, the compliment, the I see you moment. In America, we're trained from childhood to respond to friendliness. A cashier says, "How's your day?" and you answer automatically. A coworker compliments your new haircut and you feel a little closer to them, even if you barely know them. Manipulators understand this instinct and amplify it. They shower you with attention, they make you feel special, and without realizing it, you start to feel indebted. When someone is overly good to you, your brain pushes you to reciprocate. Suddenly, you're doing favors you didn't plan on, all because you felt like you owed them. That's not kindness, that's calculated leverage. Another classic tool is guilt. And let's be honest, guilt is one of the most powerful weapons in the world. The manipulator plays the victim, the overworked soul, the misunderstood friend. I don't know what I'd do without you. No one ever really listens to me like you do. They don't ask you for anything directly, they don't have to. A sigh, a sad look, a disappointed tone, it's enough to make you bend. Because if you don't, you're not just saying no to a request, you're saying no to a person who seems wounded. And most of us hate that feeling. So we give in, not because we want to, but because we want to stop the guilt. That's not compassion, that's emotional blackmail dressed in soft clothing. And then there's fear. The most primal of all tools. A manipulator knows how to paint catastrophic scenarios that trap you in hesitation. If you leave me, you'll never find anyone like me again. If you don't do this, you'll regret it forever. If you say no, you'll be left out, forgotten. Notice something, they're not chaining you up, they're planting ideas. And ideas are far stronger than chains because they live inside your head. Once you start doubting your own ability to act, you're stuck. You stay in relationships too long, in jobs that drain you, in dynamics that suffocate you, because fear whispers, it's safer to stay than to leave. What's fascinating is that manipulation often starts long before words are spoken. It begins in silence. The pause before a request. The tilt of the head. The choice of when to approach you. A seasoned manipulator knows the rhythm of your emotions. They know when you're vulnerable, when you're tired, when you're craving approval. And that's when they strike. Now, let's bring this into modern life because you see it every single day. That salesperson who makes you feel like you're their favorite customer? They've been trained to mirror your body language, to echo your words back to you, to create a false sense of trust. That boss who guilt trips you into working late by saying, "We're a family here." They know exactly how to turn your loyalty into unpaid overtime. That partner who says, "After all I've done for you, you can't even do this one thing?" They're not appealing to love, they're appealing to debt. Niccolo Machiavelli, the master of cold political strategy, understood this centuries ago. He wrote that people judge more by appearances than by reality. In other words, people believe what they see, not what is true. Manipulation is exactly that, a performance staged to look like reality. The manipulator is the director, and without knowing it, you become part of their cast. You play the role they assign you, the rescuer, the loyal friend, the grateful employee. And you believe the story is yours. That's the scariest part, you believe it's yours. Because when manipulation is done well, it doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like life. It feels like love. It feels like loyalty. And yet, beneath that surface, it's a script written to serve someone else's interests. So why does this matter? Because the moment you recognize these tools, charm, guilt, fear, you start to reclaim your power. You stop confusing kindness with obligation. You stop mistaking victimhood for truth. You stop letting fear dictate your choices. And once you do that, you shift from being a puppet to being an observer. You stop being easy prey. But here's the twist, manipulators don't succeed because they're powerful. They succeed because we have gaps inside us that let them in. And that's exactly where we're headed next. If you don't know your vulnerabilities, you'll keep falling for the same tricks over and over. The manipulator only wins because they see what you don't. But once you see it, once you recognize the gap, you can close it. That's the next step. First you learn their tools. Then you learn your own. And when you combine those two, you stop playing the game blindly and start playing it on purpose. We've uncovered the toolkit. We've looked at the manipulator's weapons, charm, guilt, fear, silence, timing. But now comes the real question, why do these tools work on us in the first place? Because let's be honest, no one can manipulate you unless there's already a doorway inside you. Manipulation doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens because there's a gap in your armor, a blind spot in your awareness, a wound you haven't fully healed. That gap is the reason you get hooked, and until you confront it, you'll keep falling for the same game again and again. So what are these gaps? Let's start with the most common one, the need for approval. Think back to when you were a kid. Maybe you learned early that love wasn't unconditional. Maybe love came as a prize, you behaved, you got praised. You disappointed, you got silence or punishment. Over time, you wired yourself to chase validation. You learned to smile when you didn't feel like it, to say yes when every part of you wanted to say no, and that training doesn't just vanish when you grow up. It sticks. As an adult, it shows up in subtle ways. You can't stand the thought of someone being disappointed in you. You bend over backward to keep the peace. And when a manipulator senses this, they don't have to do much. A compliment here, a frown there, and you're already shifting your behavior to win their approval. That hunger to be liked becomes the leash they pull. Another powerful gap is guilt. So many of us were taught that thinking of ourselves is selfish. Maybe you grew up in a family where sacrifice was glorified, where saying no meant you didn't care enough. And now, as an adult, you carry guilt like a weight on your shoulders. Every time you set a boundary, you feel like you're betraying someone. Every time you prioritize your own well-being, you hear an inner voice whispering, "You're being ungrateful. You're being cold." Manipulators feed on this guilt like sharks in the water. They don't have to demand. They just imply. After everything I've done for you, if you really cared, you would, and that's all it takes. You crumble under the guilt, not because you want to, but because you've been conditioned to. And then there's fear, the deepest and most universal gap of all. Fear of rejection. Fear of loneliness. Fear of not being enough. For some people, this fear is so strong they would rather stay in toxic relationships than face the possibility of being alone. They would rather keep a draining job than risk unemployment. They would rather tolerate disrespect than confront it. Because in their mind, confrontation means rejection, and rejection means abandonment. Manipulators know this fear intimately. They promise you safety, then quietly threaten to take it away. Without me, you'll have nothing. If you leave, you'll regret it. They don't need chains. The fear is the chain. These gaps aren't random. They have origins. They come from childhood experiences, cultural conditioning, past trauma, the stories you've carried for years without ever questioning them. Think about it. How many beliefs do you carry that you didn't actually choose? I need to be nice or people won't like me. I need to sacrifice to deserve love. I'm nothing without someone by my side. These aren't truths. These are scripts handed to you early in life. And manipulators? They don't create those scripts, they just read them out loud and watch you follow. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, said something powerful: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That's exactly what's happening here. These gaps, approval, guilt, fear, live in your unconscious. You think you're making free choices, but in reality, you're reacting to wounds you haven't faced. You call it love, friendship, loyalty, but often it's just unhealed pain being exploited. Now, here's where it gets personal. I want you to ask yourself, what's your gap? Is it that craving for people to like you? Is it the guilt of saying no? Is it the fear of being left out or left behind? Because the manipulator doesn't need to be smarter than you, stronger than you, richer than you. They only need to know what you can't face inside yourself. And once they find it, they can guide you anywhere they want. Let me give you an example. Imagine two people offered the same manipulation. The first has a deep need for approval. The manipulator says, "I don't know how I'd manage without you." Immediately, they feel flattered and responsible. They agree, even when it costs them. The second person? They know their worth. They don't need outside approval. They hear the same words, smile politely, and keep their boundary. The difference isn't in the manipulator, it's in the gap. So here's the hard truth: you're not manipulated because you're weak. You're manipulated because you're human. Every human being has a blind spot, a wound, an unacknowledged desire. That's not shameful. That's reality. The problem isn't that you have these gaps. The problem is that you let them stay hidden. As long as they're in the dark, they control you. Once you bring them into the light, you control them. This is why awareness is everything. You don't need to be perfect to stop being manipulated. You just need to know yourself better than the manipulator knows you. When you can spot your hunger for approval before it drives your decisions, you cut the string. When you can name the guilt before it bends your boundaries, you cut the string. When you can face the fear and still move forward, you cut the string. So let me ask you directly, which gap runs your life? What belief, what wound, what fear are you carrying that someone else could use against you today? Sit with that question, because the answer will tell you where you're most vulnerable. And here's the promise: once you see it, you can seal it. Once you seal it, the manipulator loses their power. In the next stage, we're going to talk about how to build emotional armor, how to strengthen yourself so that even when someone tries to pull the strings, nothing moves. But remember this: the only reason the toolkit works is because of the gap inside you. And the moment you close that gap, you stop being a puppet and start becoming untouchable. By now you can see how the game is played. You've seen the manipulator's toolkit. You've looked at the gaps inside yourself, the need for approval, the guilt, the fear, that make you vulnerable. So the next question is obvious: How do you protect yourself? How do you stop being a predictable target and start living with clarity and strength? This is where we talk about building emotional armor. Let me be clear from the start, emotional armor doesn't mean shutting down. It doesn't mean becoming cold, detached, or unfeeling. That's not strength, that's just another form of weakness disguised as toughness. Real emotional armor allows you to stay warm, kind, empathetic, but without being played. It's about balance, caring without being controlled, giving without being drained, listening without being led. And to build it, you need practice. You need awareness. And you need the courage to break patterns that have kept you trapped for years. The first step is recognizing your triggers. Every manipulator depends on patterns. They know that if they praise you, you'll soften. If they sigh, you'll feel guilty. If they threaten, you'll freeze. Emotional armor begins with noticing what happens inside you when those triggers appear. Do you feel your stomach tighten when someone frowns at you? Do you feel a rush of panic when you sense rejection? Do you automatically say yes just to avoid conflict? These automatic responses are what make you predictable. And predictable people are easy to control. The moment you can pause and recognize, this is the trigger, you start cutting the string. The second step is what I call strategic detachment. Imagine you're in a storm. Rain, thunder, chaos all around you. If you stand in the middle of it, you get soaked, overwhelmed. But if you step back under a roof, you can watch the storm without drowning in it. That's detachment. It's not ignoring people or being cold. It's creating enough space between you and the emotion so you can actually think. When someone compliments you, don't rush to believe it's the whole truth. When someone criticizes you, don't immediately accept their judgment as reality. When someone pressures you, don't let urgency override your clarity. Detachment is saying, let me step back and see this for what it is before I react. The third step is unpredictability. Manipulators thrive on patterns. They rely on the fact that you will react the same way every time. They know you'll comfort them when they cry, that you'll give in when they pressure, that you'll argue when they provoke. So the strongest move you can make is to break the script. Say no when they expect a yes. Stay silent when they expect a fight. Walk away when they expect you to plead. That unpredictability throws them off balance. They can't play a game when they don't know the rules anymore. Another key part of emotional armor is building a solid identity. The more you know who you are, the less you need other people to define you. Manipulators prey on shaky identities. They make you doubt yourself, question your worth, second-guess your instincts. If your inner compass isn't strong, their words become your map. But when you're rooted, when you know your values, your boundaries, your purpose, you stop being tossed around by every emotional gust of wind. You can still listen, still empathize, but you won't abandon yourself in the process. Now, let's get real. This isn't easy. Because it means breaking habits you've lived with for years. It means tolerating discomfort. When you say no instead of yes, you'll feel that awkward silence. When you pause instead of reacting, people might get frustrated. When you refuse to play the old game, manipulators will push harder at first. They'll test your boundaries, hoping you'll fold. And this is where most people break. They can't stand the discomfort. But here's the truth, discomfort is the price of freedom. That silence after you say no? That's not rejection, it's liberation. That tension in the air when you hold your boundary? That's your armor being forged. Let me give you an example. Imagine someone at work always dumps tasks on you because they know you won't refuse. The old you says yes automatically, then feels resentful. The new you pauses, feels the discomfort rising, and says calmly, "No, I can't take that on." They may look shocked. They may even try to guilt you. But you stand your ground. That moment of discomfort? That's your emotional armor in action. And the next time, it gets easier. Here's another example. In a relationship, your partner uses guilt. If you loved me, you'd do this. The old you folds immediately because you don't want to feel like you're failing them. The new you pauses, detaches, and replies. Love isn't measured by doing everything you demand. You don't fight, you don't shout, you just step out of the trap. That moment might feel risky, but that's the moment your armor shields you. Machiavelli once wrote that men must either be pampered or destroyed, because if merely offended, they will seek revenge. Harsh words, yes, but here's the truth hidden in them. In the game of power, there's no neutral ground. Either you learn to protect your emotional space, or someone else will invade it. Emotional armor isn't about fighting every battle, it's about not letting battles even touch you. So let's bring this home. Building emotional armor is about three things: awareness of your triggers, the courage to pause, and the discipline to break your old patterns. It's about living with clarity instead of reflex. It's about saying, I still care, but I will not be controlled. And most importantly, it's about remembering this: your worth isn't up for negotiation. No manipulator gets to decide your value. Now, I want you to picture yourself wearing this armor. Not as a wall that keeps the world out, but as a shield that lets you walk through life freely. Imagine having conversations where you don't feel pressured, relationships where you're not drowning in guilt, decisions where you're not paralyzed by fear. That's what this armor gives you. It gives you back your agency. It gives you back your peace. And it turns you from a predictable target into someone untouchable. But here's the challenge: armor only works if you wear it every day. This isn't about watching one video, reading one book, having one insight. This is about practice. Daily practice. Noticing the trigger, pausing before reacting, holding your ground even when it's uncomfortable. That's how the armor is built. That's how it gets stronger. And once you have it, the manipulator's toolkit starts to look pathetic. Their charm bounces off. Their guilt loses its sting. Their fear tactics dissolve. Because you no longer react like a puppet, you respond like a strategist. That's the difference between living at the mercy of others and living in your own power. So here's the question: are you ready to put on the armor? Because once you do, the world will never manipulate you in the same way again. Up until now, we've been talking about manipulation in general terms. We've looked at strangers, sales tactics, the media, the subtle games people play. But let's be honest, that's the easy stuff. The real test isn't spotting manipulation in an ad or resisting a pushy coworker. The hardest test is when the manipulation comes from the people closest to you, your family, your partner, your boss, your oldest friend. Because when manipulation wears the mask of love, tradition, or loyalty, it becomes 10 times harder to resist. Think about this. It's one thing to recognize that a stranger is using charm to get what they want. It's another thing entirely to look at your spouse, the person who says they love you, and realize they're using guilt or fear to control your choices. It's one thing to ignore an ad on TV. It's another thing to hear your mother's voice saying, after everything I sacrificed for you, you're really going to choose yourself over family? These aren't abstract tactics anymore. These are emotional weapons wrapped in bonds that matter to you. And that's what makes them so dangerous. In romantic relationships, manipulation often hides under the name of love. I'm only doing this because I care about you. Without you, my life has no meaning. On the surface, it sounds passionate, even flattering. But look closer. Love that demands submission is not love, it's control. Real love respects freedom. Manipulative love demands obedience. And if you've ever found yourself constantly walking on eggshells in a relationship, trying to avoid upsetting your partner, that's not love protecting you, that's manipulation training you. In families, manipulation often wears the clothing of tradition or duty. You can't do this to your father. You owe your mother respect. Of course respect matters. Of course family matters. But when respect is demanded through guilt, it stops being respect, it becomes a leash. You're no longer honoring your family from choice, you're being controlled through obligation. And if you grew up in a household where guilt and fear were the main tools of parenting, you may carry those patterns into adulthood without even noticing. In the workplace, manipulation often hides under loyalty and gratitude. A boss says, "We're a family here," but what they really mean is, work unpaid hours and don't complain. A mentor says, I gave you this chance, so you owe me. And suddenly you're doing far more than you should, not because it's fair, but because you're scared to appear ungrateful. Gratitude is a beautiful value, but gratitude twisted into a lifelong debt is nothing but manipulation in disguise. So how do you deal with it? How do you resist when the manipulator is someone you care about, someone you can't just block or walk away from overnight? This is where emotional armor gets put to the ultimate test. The first step is setting boundaries. Clear, firm, unapologetic boundaries. Not boundaries you explain or justify, but boundaries you stand by. A simple no said with calm confidence is more powerful than 1,000 excuses. And here's the key, you don't need to explain your boundaries to someone who is determined to cross them. Explanations only give manipulators material to twist. Boundaries are not about convincing them, they're about protecting you. The second step is exposure. When manipulation is subtle, call it out. Say what you see. If your partner says, if you loved me, you'd do this, respond with, that's emotional blackmail, and I won't accept it. If your boss says, you should be grateful, respond with, I am grateful, but that doesn't mean I'll ignore my limits. The purpose isn't to fight, it's to shine light on the tactic. Manipulation thrives in silence. Once named, it loses power. The third step is standing firm when the backlash comes. Because let's be clear, it will come. Manipulators test boundaries. They'll get louder. They'll play the victim. They'll use silence, insults, drama. They'll do whatever they can to pull you back into the old pattern. And this is where most people break. They think it's easier just to give in. But every time you give in, you reinforce the manipulator's power. Standing firm is uncomfortable, yes. But it's the only way to teach the other person, and yourself, that the old game doesn't work anymore. And sometimes, the hardest truth is this, loving someone doesn't mean staying tied to them. Sometimes the bravest act of love is walking away. Walking away from the partner who confuses control with affection. Walking away from the family member who weaponizes guilt. Walking away from the boss who exploits gratitude. Because as long as you keep dancing their dance, they'll never face their emptiness. And you'll lose yourself. This is the painful part of emotional freedom. It's realizing that not every bond is healthy, not every kind of love is real, not every tradition is worth preserving. Some relationships protect you. Others suffocate you. And if you don't make that distinction, you'll spend your life in an invisible prison, trapped by obligations that were never yours to carry. But when you finally step out of that prison, something changes. You begin to see beyond words, beyond masks, beyond the theater of manipulation. You begin to trust your clarity more than their stories. You stop confusing loyalty with servitude. You stop confusing love with control. And in that moment, you gain a new vision, a vision that allows you to choose freely, without guilt, without fear, without obligation. And that vision is what we need as we move forward. Because it's not enough to defend yourself. Once you've broken free from toxic manipulation, you have to learn how to play the bigger game. How to apply strategy, how to protect your mind in a world where influence is constant. And that's what comes next, stepping beyond defense and learning how to think strategically, how to play the game of influence without losing your soul. So let me leave you with this thought, manipulation from strangers is annoying. Manipulation from people you love is devastating. But it doesn't have to define you. You can love and still have boundaries. You can care and still say no. You can stay connected without being controlled. And when you learn that, you step into a whole new level of freedom. We've come a long way together. We've looked at the hidden strings of manipulation. We've studied the manipulator's toolkit. We've confronted the gaps inside us, built emotional armor, and faced the hardest test of all, manipulation at home and work. But now it's time for the final step. Because it's not enough just to defend yourself. Freedom isn't just about resisting. True freedom comes when you move from being a pawn on someone else's board to becoming the player who shapes the game. This is the moment where you take back control. Niccolo Machiavelli, the political thinker people either love or hate, understood something about human nature that still rings true today: perception is more powerful than truth. People don't act on facts, they act on how they see the facts. That's why manipulators work so hard to control appearances, stories, and narratives. They know if they shape what you believe, they don't have to force your behavior. You'll do it yourself. But here's the empowering side of that truth: once you understand perception, you can use it to your advantage. You can stop being swallowed by the narratives of others and start creating your own. What does this mean in real life? It means stop living on emotional autopilot. Most people drift through their days reacting to everything around them. A coworker makes a comment, and they react. Their partner gives a look, and they react. The news flashes a headline, and they react. That's not freedom, that's conditioning. To take back control, you have to step out of reaction and step into anticipation. You stop asking, "What just happened to me?" and start asking, "What's likely to happen next, and how do I want to respond?" That's the first shift, from reaction to strategy. The manipulator is strategic. They plan, they anticipate, they prepare. Your defense is to do the same. Instead of being pulled by the moment, you pause and position yourself. You become the chess player instead of the chess piece. The second shift is mastering silence. Most people reveal far too much. They over-explain, they overshare, they expose their weaknesses without even realizing it. Manipulators thrive on that information. They use every detail you give them as ammunition. But when you learn the power of silence, everything changes. Silence makes people uncomfortable. It forces them to reveal more than they planned. It keeps your emotions hidden and your strength intact. Silence is not weakness, it's one of the strongest moves you can make. Because when you don't react the way they expect, the game loses its script. The third shift is learning to manage perception. This doesn't mean being fake. It doesn't mean lying about who you are. It means understanding that in life, people see what you present. And if you present yourself as unsure, hesitant, apologetic, manipulators will swarm like vultures. But if you carry yourself with quiet confidence, even when you don't feel it yet, you create an invisible shield. You don't have to broadcast your every thought. You don't have to prove your worth to everyone. You show enough to set the tone, and the rest you keep to yourself. Because real power isn't about what people see, it's about what they don't see. The fourth shift is emotional responsibility. Manipulators feed on instability. They need you to doubt, fear, hesitate, overreact. If you let your emotions run wild, they will steer you. But when you own your emotions, when you regulate yourself, calm yourself, ground yourself, you become impenetrable. It's not about becoming emotionless. It's about being the driver instead of the passenger. The storm can rage outside, but inside, you're steady. And when you're steady, no one can pull you off your path. So how do you practice this in daily life? Start small. In a conversation, notice when you feel pressured to explain yourself, and stop. In a meeting, resist the urge to fill silence with nervous chatter, just sit with it. When you sense fear pushing you to act too quickly, breathe and wait. These small choices build strength. Over time, they turn into habits. And those habits build an identity no manipulator can shake. Let's talk about identity for a moment. Because everything comes back to this. Manipulators thrive when you don't know who you are. They tell you what you should believe, how you should act, what you should fear. And if you're unsure of yourself, you believe them. But when your identity is strong, when you know your values, your limits, your worth, you stop needing their approval. You stop fearing their disapproval. You stop mistaking their narrative for reality. A solid identity is the ultimate armor, the ultimate strategy, the ultimate freedom. Now, here's the final and maybe hardest truth: as long as you don't take control of your own mind, someone else will. And it won't always be the obvious manipulator. Sometimes it's a smiling friend. Sometimes it's a phrase you've carried since childhood. Sometimes it's society itself, whispering that you must be nice, obedient, agreeable. Manipulation isn't always in the words of others. It's in the beliefs you never questioned. It's in the emotions you treat as absolute truths. It's in the habits that feel natural but are actually conditioned responses. Freedom begins the moment you stop calling conditioning free will. And freedom demands a cost. It means breaking the illusion that everyone has good intentions. It means dismantling the comfortable image you've built of yourself as the endlessly kind, endlessly available person. It means tolerating the silence after a no, the discomfort of boundaries, the loneliness of walking away from toxic dynamics. But the reward? The reward is living on your own terms, finally and fully. So here's my challenge to you. Look at the strings that still hold you. See the invisible games that still run your life. And decide today, will you keep being a pawn in someone else's theater, or will you step into the role of strategist? Will you keep dancing to music you didn't choose, or will you cut the strings and write your own score? Because once you see the game, you can never unsee it. Once you understand the rules, you can choose how to play. And the truth is, you don't have to play small anymore. You don't have to be predictable. You don't have to live at the mercy of guilt, fear, or the hunger for approval. You can live with clarity, with purpose, with strength. From pawn to player, that's the journey. And it starts the moment you decide that no one else writes your script but you. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this journey. I know your time is valuable. If this message spoke to you, if it gave you even one moment of clarity or peace, I'd be grateful if you'd let me know. A simple like, a comment with your thoughts, or subscribing to the channel helps this community grow, and it helps more people who might need these words to find them. Share your reflections below, I do read them. I'll see you in the next chapter. Until then, take care of your peace.